Okay, ready to go. Right, welcome everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. My name's Rob Plevin and it's my pleasure to bring you another free webinar for teachers and lecturers through the Classroom Expert website. As you will see, it's a good idea to take notes. Please turn off your Skypes and your emails, if only just to save you from getting interrupted whilst you're on the call. Our speaker today, you really need to listen to everything he's got to say, so you don't want to be interrupted as it's going through. And feel free to ask questions. I'm on the call throughout. I'll moderate questions, I'll feed them through to Paul, and I'll also add some to the end as well. So any relevant questions you've got, just feed them into the question box and I'll feed them through. I mention this every time. Those of you that are on the call will be sick of hearing this, but free replay packs are available to all our members of Lessonology.com and ConfidentClassroomManagement.com. We do have a replay up of this call for about 3 to 5 days for those people that missed the live session. But if you want to get all our past webinars, and we've got a good collection coming online now, it's a good idea to take a membership out with either Lessonology or Confident Classroom Management. I'll not hammer that too much. I'll not labour the point. We'll leave that there. Okay. We will do a short question and answer at the end. Paul's going to do, I think there's about 4 or 5 questions on there, plus any that come through during the call. Now, if you ask any teacher in the UK at least who's trained over the last 10 years, it's almost guaranteed that they will have heard of or bought the best-selling book, The Teacher's Toolkit. Many people feel this is one of the best, if not the best, books on student engagement and motivation, and I believe it's now on the reading list for many teacher training courses too. Well, today's speaker is the author of that book, and he knows all about designing amazing lesson experiences, having spent the last 20 years training teachers and giving them practical, workable solutions for the classroom. This is a man whose training diary is fully booked for 10 months in advance, which gives you some idea of how popular he is and how very, very lucky we are to get to listen to his ideas today. Ladies and gentlemen, today's speaker, I'm very proud to say, is Mr. Paul Ginnis. Paul, welcome to the call.
Thank you very much, Rob.
Paul, I'm going to swap the presenter over to you, so you should see that come
okay.
in a second. Okay, so your slide should come up now. You got the link?
Okay, I think we're ready. Can you see me?
We've got you there. Yep, wonderful. Thank you, Paul. Over to you.
Okay, so am I on?
You are on. Up and running.
All right, well, hello everyone. I'm really feeling very privileged to be able to present this webinar, and I'm really sorry about the technical blip at the beginning. But we're all sorted now. We've lost a little bit of time, but we'll make that up. It's a real pleasure to speak to you. Some of you I think I already know through Twitter, and many of you, of course, I don't. So thanks very much, Rob, for giving me the chance to present this to so many people. And I want to say at the beginning that, you know, I'm not an academic, I'm not a researcher, I'm basically a teacher. And I started teaching, would you believe, 33 years ago, teaching religious education. And all I've done along the way for all those years is just to try and reflect on my practice, to keep improving it. And that's meant a lot of trial and error, a lot of burnt fingers. And along the way, listening to a lot of other people whose experience was greater and ideas were better than mine, and learning from them, and also keeping an eye on little important bits of theory just to illuminate and inform what I've been doing. So I also know that a number of you are drawn to these webinars because you face particular behavior issues or you teach special needs, and I have to declare that I'm not in fact an expert in either, but I do hope that what I do have to offer you today will at least go some way to helping you think through some of the specific issues that you face. And I know that 1 or 2 of those have come through the questions that you've already sent me, but there are people I think presenting seminars in this series who will be able to address those needs much more precisely than I will. So what I can offer you are some ideas about engaging and motivating students of all ages. I'm going to offer you some examples and some practical ideas for working with young children as well as older children too. And we have people listening, I think, from a whole range of school or educational settings. So, you know, I'm not going to meet all your needs, but I'm just asking that you do the rest of the mental journey for yourselves as you try and apply what I've got to offer you. I'm on Twitter, for those who don't know, and those who do, hello. If we interact already, I've got a little website as well. And along the way I've written a number of books, and Rob was kind enough to mention the Teacher's Toolkit, which is probably the most well-known of them, available in a whole range of languages, and more recently with my wife Sharon, a book for young children, well, for teachers of young children, for early years, foundation stage, key stage 1, kindergarten, pre-kindy, and that's covering the curriculum stories. At the end, I'd like to make a little offer from my publishers, a discount for these books should you be interested. But you know, perhaps the biggest lesson of all that I've learned over these years is basically not to keep trying to do the same thing the same way and hope one day it'll work out okay. And I'm inspired by the great Albert Einstein, whose definition of insanity many of you will know is doing the same thing the same way, and guess what? Expecting a different result. And I know that some of you work hard to try and refine existing practice, and sometimes we just have to think outside of the box and consider more significant changes of strategy. And just to encourage you and to illustrate the point, here are one or two photos of something that happened actually in a little fishing village called Roundstone on the Galway coast in Ireland. And many of you will have seen these pictures before, but if you haven't, they're a bit of fun. And what's happened is that somebody's driven, well, actually they left the handbrake off, and the car, as you can see, fell into the water overnight, and it's been retrieved the next morning by the local haulage company. And if you notice, it looks a bit dodgy, so let's see what happens. Yeah, you got it. And so now there's a double problem. So what do people do? Do they think, hey, you know, that didn't work, we'll do something different? No, they do the same thing, but bigger. And so they do the same thing, the same way, and what they're going to expect? What they're going to get? A different result? I don't think so. And so what do? Well, they just think about doing the same thing, the same way, and continue to hope. So that's the kind of opening gambit, really, and it's in that spirit that I offer you the lessons that I think I've learned. And I've only gathered these lessons together, actually, for this webinar, as Rob, in a sense, prompted me to reflect on these many years of experience and see what's come up. Well, here they are. Let me give you the overview first. I'll give you all 8, and then we'll see how many we get through in the time. The first one I'm going to dwell on, because I think this underpins really so much to do with motivation and engagement, and it's intriguing learners. We'll have a close look at that. And one of the ways I think that you intrigue learners is by ensuring that the level of challenge you present them is sufficiently inviting, tantalizing, taxing, sufficiently stiff for them to want to have a go at it. It's how computer games work. And I think human beings have a natural instinct, certainly the adolescent brain, the young child's brain, has an instinct to want to master new situations, hone new skills, overcome difficulties, and rise to challenges. And that leads us then to consider the idea of learning, even exam syllabus learning, which is very fixed, non-negotiable. Learning can be driven by problems, and I want to show you how content can be turned into problems for students to solve, and that way it becomes much more inviting for them. And that leads in turn to the idea of reverse teaching, which is like teaching backwards. And I want to talk to you a little bit about how maybe you can design lessons that are non-typical. And if you just turn around the component parts, then you find, hey presto, you end up engaging learners, and often that the learning goes much deeper. It's constructed learning. And much of what I will say to you is based on the good old-fashioned educational idea of constructivism. Underpinning all of this is the spirit of inquiry, of course, and the notion that really many learners resist the idea of having learning stuffed down their throats. It's not what their brains are designed to do, to just soak up ideas and information and skills from other people, although sometimes they'll want that. But indeed, the brain is designed to go out in search of learning, to find things out, work things out for itself. And inquiry that is co-constructed, and that's just a technical term for negotiated learning, I think tends to, again, press a number of motivational buttons. So those first 5 are really kind of all in a bracket. And then I want to have a few words about physicalization, making learning not just tactile, but kinesthetic. Many of you will know about that. I want to show you a couple of examples if there's time. The idea of responsiveness, which is the teacher being responsive to learners' needs on the hoof. That's a big feature, of course, currently in England in the inspection framework, the Ofsted framework, as we call it in England. The idea of learners not having a plan and sticking to it, but having a plan and being flexible with it as they identify and try and meet learners' needs on the go. And then finally, self-management, the idea that learners are usually most motivated, I've discovered, when they have some degree of control over their learning. They're making decisions about time, about resources, and indeed, I'll say, about differentiation. So that's the overview. Phew, whether we'll get through it all, I don't know, but we'll give it a go. And forgive me for dwelling on the first one, which is about intrigue, because I think this is kind of key. So let me just show you one or two pictures. Here's the first. What's happened here? You know, that's the question that the teacher asked the class in a more excited tone. What's happened here? What's happened here? Come and have a look. She brought her class out one morning to view what looks like an alien crash landing site in the corner of the playground. Of course, what she'd done is the previous evening set up with the school caretaker this collection of junk and an upturned oil drum with bits welded onto it, a bit of danger tape, and the kids come out and they know full well it's bits of junk and an oil drum turned upside down, but being little kids, they are willing to suspend belief and engage their imaginative juices in response to the inviting, intriguing question, what's happened? Where's this come from? How long's it been here? Why did things go wrong? Was there anybody in it? And before long, you've got a developing scenario that's coming out of the minds of the learners who feel excited and intrigued and engaged, and within which then the teacher can invite them to explore all kinds of lines of inquiry, in this case about space, space travel, planets, distances between planets, etc. And I think if we're going to intrigue learners, we have to be careful to choose the right kind of stimulus that invites imagination and on the back of which then learners can be creative and generate the motivation to want to find out more. So where's this box come from? What's inside it? Who did it belong to? How old is it? What's special about it? And it doesn't take much, just an intriguing item, an intriguing photograph, along with open questions to start to create a sense of delight because there's a mystery to be solved. And when my wife Sharon and I present courses to primary school teachers, here's an example. We tend to take a whole load of stuff. Would you believe we've got an industrial storage unit where we store all the gear that we've bought from junk shops and garage sales and car boot sales and knick-knack shops and so on. Items that even for adults will stimulate their imagination, just to illustrate the fact that to get kids going on, say, a creative project, a creative topic. I know some primary teachers listening are interested in a creative curriculum. Then it needs to be stimulated, and the way to do that is to find items of which questions are begged. And we model this with teachers. It also, of course, is a great introduction to fiction writing, and in England we have a bit of a problem with getting boys to write stories, good quality stories, because they get bored by the technicalities. But often they're very patient about the technicalities once they're fired up about the story, which has to be one that's beating in their hearts, driven by some stimulus material which intrigues and invites answers. So have a look at this little sequence. Just a simple lamp, and the questions that are asked by the teacher are crucial. How old is it? Where's it from? Where was it found? Whose hands has it passed through? Does it have any special properties? Look at the lad there with his head in his hands, not looking that interested at this stage. Look how kind of, disengaged he appears. But as the answers start to come from other learners and ideas start to build, then he gets sucked in, because this is human nature. Especially with little kids. Look, he's got his hand up now. He's got an idea to offer. They live in a world of play, and the teacher can capitalize on that. In fact, I don't think people grow out of play. And we go to the theatre, we watch films, it's often surrogate play, but nonetheless we all love stories, we all love imagination. I know some of you are bothered about things like autism, and I want to show you some slides in a little while of a little bit of success that Sharon and some colleagues at a special school have been having with autistic students, radically in fact, engaging them in imaginative play. But here's another example where the intrigue here is around my wife Sharon, who's in role as a servant called Rima in a castle. The topic is castles, and the learners are going to learn all about what it's like to live in a castle, what a castle's made of, how you heat a castle, what people wore, what they ate, and so on. But we're doing it through a mystery about a magic book that's somewhere in the castle that needs to be found, and its magic powers need to be harnessed. So we go on an exploration, and in the students, in the children's heads, is building a picture of the inside of a castle as the servant takes them around, and then they want to know more. And it's all driven by this idea of needing to find, perhaps down a dark tunnel, maybe up a spiral staircase, there's the magic book that will be the answer to the conundrum. Here, Sharon is enrolled as a princess who's lost all her friends. Why? Because she's a bit of a selfish bitch, and her friends don't like her anymore. So these kids who know all about friendship and making and breaking friends are keen to solve the problem and enter into a whole investigation about relationships based on this this difficulty faced by the princess. Here we're learning about the structure of the Earth's crust, as in a James Bond-style thriller epic quest. The learners are going through a deeper and deeper sequence of caves, deeper into the Earth, and it's getting warmer, and we're passing lots of different rocks and fossils and all kinds. It generates then a great desire to know more about rocks and so on. And here with very young children who volunteered to be staff at an animal welfare centre, they're generating an interest in animals and what they need to do to look after them, what they need to eat, how they need to be cared for, and so on. And in this little sequence, we're looking at mini beasts. And rather than just go out and look at mini beasts and have worksheets on mini beasts, in fact, it's a whole intriguing story about an elderly lady called Mrs. Lezacek, who has in the corner of her garden, overgrown by weeds, an old machine that's reputed to be able to shrink people down to the size of ants. Shall we go in it? Dare we do it? And of course the answer is yes. So with a touch of kind of hairy scariness, it's all play. There's no real shrinking, of course. The kids know that, but that's what play is. You can explore all kinds of things that are just not harmful, not real, but in their heads they feel the excitement. And we shrink down to the size of ants, and we explore all the creepy crawlies, all the big monsters, all the scary creatures. We have to make sure we don't get tangled up in spiders' webs and fall down wormholes. Then we're shrunk back to real life, and there's a real interest then in creating environments and ecosystems and learning all about water and sand and pervious and impervious and the different places creatures live, dry and dank and dark and light and so on. All the artwork that's stimulated by that. As you can see, this is a lovely painting. You can see the blades of grass, you can see the flowers, from a perspective of the ant, you know, looking up at, and it's just great to see that. And then we go out and start to look for the real things, and all the science then follows and flows quite naturally. So I mentioned a book that Sharon and I had written a while back, and this is really Sharon's work rather than mine. You know, the key to this, I think, that makes the difference between ordinary stories that are read or told to children that are exciting themselves but not quite doing the business, compared to the teacher working in role, getting inside the story with the children, playing a part within the story. And that means having an inviting stimulus to kick things off, which might be a picture, it might be an artifact, it might be a place, it might be a person, as we saw with the princess and the castle servant, around which are asked open-ended questions that stimulate imagination. And once the imagination is fired and the ideas are being harnessed, then through play we build belief and commitment to that scenario, from within which then the teacher working in role can add problems and dilemmas for the characters within the story to face that causes students to think, often at a very high level, and to pursue lines of inquiry which of course connect to the curriculum. So the curriculum is covered from within the heart of the story. Now I'm going to pause in a little while, but just let me show you one or two more things. Some of you I know are bothered about how this might work with students who have particular learning difficulties. Well, here's a special school in England where they're working on one of the stories actually from the book, and it's called The Remedy Rocket, going off to deliver medicines to a colony of people who are sick on a foreign planet, and so on and so on. And the students are going to be in role as astronauts. So just have a look at these rather old 60s astronauts outfits, and here are the students dressed in them. Well, actually they're from B&Q. These are like painters' overalls, but you know, they're dirt cheap, but it just helps build belief. A bit of costume, and you couldn't believe how these students are engaging with each other. With Sharon, they built a space rocket, you can see it in the background there, and they're on a mission, they're on a quest, they're having to deal with situations, they're having to learn about all kinds of technicalities in order to get to where they're going, and navigation and maps and control, and dealing with tricky customers along the way. There are problems, there are issues about trust and friendship and whether you can believe what people say and so on, and the debate, and the sheer enjoyment. Look at the control panel that they've made in the background there with the monitors and all the dials and knobs and so on. And what a rich experience this was. And you know, sometimes I think people fear that there are certain types of children who can't or who won't engage with this kind of approach, but I think it's about how it's set up, how it's resourced, and so on. And more recently, at another special school in Burton-on-Trent in the Midlands in England, these are learners with complex needs, as they're called, and that means they have autism and in some cases other needs as well. And for the first time, the teachers and the teaching assistants, two of them here you can see, have created an imaginary scenario, a beauty salon. And these learners, many of whom under normal circumstances just refuse to be touched, are delighting in the play. It's structured, it's purposeful, there's conversation, there's all kinds of sensory stuff going on, there's all kinds of language going on here, there's all kinds of issues around motor skills and so on. And the teachers reported just a fortnight ago that this was for them real breaking ground. And you can just get a sense of the seriousness, but the joy with which this kind of work is being received by the students. And just before I pause, let me point out that, you know, the first bit that I've presented is really around creativity, about imagination, and getting some kind of, I think, emotional commitment to the learning scenario, from within of which you can then pose questions and problems, and that generates a desire to find certain things out and work certain things out, which is how the curriculum gets covered. But what about more technical subjects like mathematics? You can still be intriguing. So here is a teacher in the Welsh Valleys where learners are not very aspirational because the economy is so poor now. Coal has disappeared that was once mined in these then proud villages of the Welsh Valleys. So they struggle with motivation, and she's not making a great deal of progress with algebra. So she presents these numbers on the interactive whiteboard and says, what do these say? And the kids start to read out the numbers, 5, 9, 16, 3, 2. She said, no, what I meant is, what are these three words? That's the intrigue. What are these three words? And they get the idea it's a code, and she then gets all excited with them about it. Yeah, it's a code. Can we break the code? I want you in these groups of 4. And they don't look that bothered initially, but then she starts to excite them. I'm going to give you an envelope, and the envelope are going to be all the clues you need. All you've got to do is put them together. The thing is that what you can't do is, once you've got your clues, you'll have about 5 or 6 each. You can't show them to anybody or give them to anybody. You can only talk, share the information, process the information through conversation. And what was in the envelopes when they were distributed, look, were these bits of algebraic information, all cut up on different bits of card. And there's more, look. What happens? We see puzzlement. Look at the boy in the middle. He's puzzled. He's intrigued. You've got him hooked. There he is again. Look on the right-hand side, the frowning boy. And before long, we see learners becoming gripped by the desire to solve the puzzle, to crack the code. They're managing their time. They're talking to each other. They end up using a whole range of low and high-level thinking skills, logic, inference, deduction, hypothesizing. There's lots of conversation. Lots of pondering. Look at the thinking that's going on there. These are students who come into maths lessons expecting them to be dull, to be honest, and often teacher-led instruction does appear dull to these students, but these now are the ones who are working it out for themselves. And in England at the moment, the inspection regime expects there to be maximum learner activity, minimum teacher input. So the teacher only spoke for a few minutes and then the kids were straight into it. And here is that group with the intrigued, frowning boy at the start, putting the finishing touches to their solution. And then the learning is drawn out at the end by the teacher through a high-quality plenary discussion where the understanding is consolidated. It's all about equivalence, the idea that when you're thinking through algebra, the value on one side of the equal sign has got to be the same as the value on the other side of the equal sign at every point. Otherwise, the maths goes pear-shaped, and that was a deep realization. That was an example of a technique from my book called Broken Pieces, where you follow a kind of formula, really, and this is a route to the kind of intriguing, motivating, engaging approach that I'm putting forward to you. That you design a tantalizing puzzle, one that's going to be just within the grasp of the students. You provide them with just enough information, not too much. Too much will spoil it, too much will make it dull. You then fragment the information so that it's in bits, which means that the learners have to join the dots. They have to put the bits together conceptually. And that's then best done by distributing those bits to different people and encouraging them to participate, to speak, to listen, to engage with each other. And some of you are saying, how do you stop learners talking endlessly through a lesson? Well, I'm hoping that by the end of this presentation, you might just sense that there isn't time to talk about anything else because you're too busy on the job of solving the problem. If I can just show you one or two more examples of this, and then I'll pause before, and I did say that I was going to dwell on this intrigue issue longest, so don't think all the sections are going to be as long as this. But just to give you one or two more ideas, I was claiming about earlier on that you can cover exam material through this kind of approach. Here's an example of that with year 10, that's grade 9 I think in the US. This is a school of working class kids who don't really get Shakespeare, and they've never heard of the play Much Ado About Nothing, but they've got to study it. So the teacher helps them out by showing them that it's set in on the island of Sicily, and uses Kenneth Branagh's famous film to give them some idea of the characters, and then says, look, by the end of today's lesson you will know the main plot of this play that you've never even heard of, but I'm not going to teach it to you. You're going to work it out for yourselves. All you've got to do is answer these 5 questions. If you can answer these 5 questions, let's see if you can be the first. Who's going to be the first group to do it? And anyway, you haven't got more than 35 minutes, so you've got to do it within that time. You've got all the information you need in the pack. If you answer these 5 questions, you will understand the main plot. So here they are with the fragmented bits and pieces, sitting in groups of 4, just getting their heads around it, and they've got the questions on the table, and they've got the character sheets on the table, and then you start to see it happen. You start to see conversation, you start to see puzzlement, you start to see engagement. Engagement with each other and engagement with the material. And by the end of the lesson, most groups had got the plot. And the teacher said it was remarkable because, do you know what? They didn't forget that. And for weeks afterwards, lesson after lesson after lesson, we could then work on the play because they have a significant core understanding, a deep understanding of the main plot, so everything else there made sense. With very young children, this is pre-kindergarten, a big book just illegally photocopied and all the pictures scattered on the floor, and the learners, in groups of 4 actually, were just pushing the pictures around to try and get them into some kind of sequence that made sense to them. No words, just looking at the pictures. There are enough clues in the pictures, in this case they're visual clues, but there's just enough for them to be able to think about what the story might be. And then the teacher says, do you want to come and see the actual book? Do you want to come and see what the author wrote? What story the author made of all of this? And of course they're very attentive because they've had a go. They then want to know. And my final example is, in fact 2 more quick examples. This is year 4. They're doing ancient Egyptians, they're doing early writing, they're doing hieroglyphs, they're doing how alphabets arose in civilizations, and instead of going through it in a kind of dull, straightforward, tedious way, the learners are in little groups, they've got a message from their family god. What's the message? Can you decipher it? And I just want you to look at the pictures here, really. You know, you can't ask for more than this in terms of engagement. Okay, these learners are pretty good learners anyway, but, you know, they don't tolerate boring lessons. Like anyone else, they drift, but here they're completely absorbed because of the nature of the intrigue. And finally, here's a piece of Year 7 history curriculum, The Princess in the Tower, King Richard III, who's reputed to have had them suffocated, visual introduction to get a sense of context, and then here's the problem, did he kill them? Was it him or was it someone else? There are rules, just like there have been for the other examples. All these activities have to be well designed and well delivered. You can't expect the activities themselves to do it for you. You have to apply a lot of skill around them, of course. Here are the clues, and here's the class. Look at this boy on the right-hand side down the bottom corner here. He's normally quite disengaged. He comes to lessons and sits down. He thinks all he's got to do is turn up. But once the mystery grabs him, his instinct kicks in. His instinct is, to solve it. He plays computer games at night. This has got the same psychology. And I'm hoping you can get a sense of how it's resulting in a fair bit of engagement with the learning, which is then consolidated at the end of the lesson by the teacher. So, look, I've said quite a lot about intrigue. I've illustrated it as best I can, and I'm going to take a pause just for a minute. Just have a think. What do you think about what I've said so far? And if you want to just send anything through to Rob, then now's your chance to do so. Let me just give you a minute just to have a little think and just pause there. Okay.
Hi, Paul.
Hi, Rob.
I'm going to feed these through as they come through because I think you should hear these. Fabulous and intriguing. Wow, I wish I was a pupil in these sessions. I'm intrigued. Wish I had teachers like this. Learning sounds a ball. Fabulous. Thanks for also covering all the technical subjects. Really intriguing. Awesome. Exciting.
Oh, that's nice. Thank you, Rob.
I'm fascinated. Really interesting. It ties... yeah, brilliant. Actually, they've tied us in together there, Paul, because I did a session on curiosity. So
I know you said you did. Yeah.
Love it. Wish I was teaching my native language so we could use more of these techniques. But Paul, they're coming in too fast. I'm going to save this question log and feed them on to you because these are lovely comments. I'm absolutely rapt here, Paul. I'm just taking it all in. It's wonderful. Really good.
I'm sorry we got off to a slow start, Rob. But
well, that was my fault.
Anyway, shall we go back to it?
Let's go.
When you're ready.
Cool. Over to you.
Are we back on? Yeah. Okay, so folks, thanks for some of your comments. It's nice to know that for some of you it's hitting the spot, and so keep feeding your thoughts and so on through to Rob. We'll see how many questions we can deal with later on, but I want to just turn what I've been saying now into a few ideas about challenge and the nature of the challenge that creates the intrigue. So let me just reference, first of all, this book, A Theory of Fun, by a guy called Ralph Costa, who's not an educationalist. He's an American computer game designer, and he has a good take on boredom. Just read that. And what I take from it is this, that effectively for children and adolescents, if they're going to regard lessons as fun, then they don't have to be laughing. Lessons don't have to be funny to be fun. They need to be challenging. They need to dismiss the boredom by asking learners' brains to work hard. That's what computer games do. Susan Greenfield, Dame Susan Greenfield actually, is Britain's greatest brain scientist. She's Professor of Pharmacology at Oxford. And here are two brain scans that she presents in one of her books. And this is where the electrical activity is concentrated when the brain is being asked to do something very dull, something very low level, something simplistic. Look at all the spare capacity. That's why you get low-level disruption in class. That's why you get kids chatting, because their brains are not fully absorbed by the learning activity. Look what happens in the brain when the task that they're asked to work on is much more complex. You get so much more engagement, so much more of the brain is required. There is no spare capacity. This is what the great Hungarian psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi called the notion of flow, where time passes, you don't notice things around you because you're absorbed in the activity. And I think this is about making sure that the level of challenge is just right. So let me give you an example, in this case from mathematics, where the teacher is coming to the end of a piece of work on shapes. They've done triangles and squares and the properties of such simple pieces of geometry, really. And at the start, the teacher said, look, this is what we're going to learn. We're going to learn what these words mean. We're going to learn what these geometric properties are. Each of these words is a technical word that has a meaning, a geometric meaning. By the end of our work, we'll know what these are. We'll be able to use these words. Now he's going to test that learning, assess that learning has occurred. And instead of just giving them a test, which would have been an easy option, certainly what he used to do because it's all he knew, he says, no, I'm going to turn the assessment into a challenge. He says, look, what I want you to do, he's going to use a technique from the teacher's toolkit called back-to-back, effectively. And he says, what I want you to do is to see whether or not you can really use these words in context, in a real situation. So in a moment, I'm going to put on the screen a diagram that I've drawn that's made of the shapes that we've been studying, triangles and squares. One of you is going to face the screen, work in pairs, and your partner will have their back to the screen, facing you, but their back to the screen. So you're face to face, one of you with your back to the screen, and the person whose back is to the screen needs to have paper and pen and a clipboard to lean on, because you're going to draw the diagram that you can't see, which means that your partner's going to have to explain it to you and describe it to you using as many of the technical terms as possible. And your aim is to build in as much of that language as you can. They have that language on their desks to refer to, and you need both to know it in order to use it, and you need to know it in order to understand it when it's described to you, and see whether or not within 5, 6, 7 minutes you can have the diagram drawn to perfection. Here's the diagram. Now, would you be able to do that? And it just ups the ante, and it turns an assessment into something that's more challenging and, frankly, as a consequence, more enjoyable, more exciting. And the kids are so desperate to turn around and see if they're right or wrong, and then the teacher says, now then, just look at those words again. Now, because you've had this experience, you should be able to jot down the ones that you now realise you're not very good at, that you don't really know, that you're not sure about. And we can come at those again now. Next lesson, I'll make sure that we revisit the stuff that you're telling me is not secure. Here's an example of the same thing happening in an international school in Vietnam, where the teacher is wanting to check students' precision in the use of technical musical language and notation. So it makes a list of all the technical words: crotchet, quaver, minim, time signature, stave, clef, and so on. And the learners are then put into the situation that I've just described, where one is describing the piece of notation to the other who can't see it. Just look at the level of concentration, look at the level of energy, look at the level of enjoyment, the sense of excitement, the fact that there's a time deadline that makes the challenge that little bit more intense. See if you can do it. Come on, bet you can, is the kind of language that the teacher's using. Here's another example. This isn't for assessing learning, this is for introducing it. This is a piece of physics. And the teacher is facing the prospect of having to introduce refraction. What a technical thing. Most kids haven't got a clue, most kids are not even interested in it, it sounds boring. For a lot of kids, they've already switched off before we begin. So we can't just go straight into refraction. We set them a challenge. Come on, see if you can. You work this out. Look, have a look at this situation. There's the sun, there's a guy, and there's a mug. And at the bottom of the mug, there's a coin. But he can't see it. Why can't he see it? Because we know light travels in straight lines. We did that last week. So the light ray from the sun hits the coin, and we know what happens. Yeah, it reflects off at the same angle. We know that. We've done all this. And as a consequence, because of where he's standing, he can't see the coin. It's too far down. It's too deep in the mug. The edge of the mug stops him seeing it. So here's your challenge. How can the man see the coin without changing his position, without changing the position of the mug, without changing the position of the coin, and of course you can't move the sun. Oh, and by the way, he can't use a mirror either. Now, just have a think. How would you do that? How can the man get to see the coin? Any ideas? What do you think? Now, some of you will know because you're scientists, or you're just clever. But the kids are working at it in pairs and threes and talking about it. Some got it, some come up with ridiculous solutions. And of course the answer is, yeah, fill the mug with water. What difference is that going to make? What do you mean you don't know? Oh, let's have a look. Let me explain to you. Whoever thought of that, you know, you were dead right. The light comes from the sun, it hits the water, and what happens? It slows down. It bends. It bounces back off the coin at the same angle, and it comes out the water, and the ray of light entering the air, what happens? It speeds up. So again, it changes angle, which gives the impression that the coin is there. So the man can pick up the coin. He's rich. So you know what? Refraction makes you richer. How about that? And the kids are hooked. I was having to teach a lesson not so long ago, would you believe, on the life of Albert Einstein. I mean, most people are not frankly that bothered, except, you know, they may be interested in the development of his hair. Look at him as a cute little lad up there in the top left, and look what became of his hair in the end. Now, I've got to do something with this because it's intrinsically boring. And much of the curriculum that we teach, kids are not naturally, intrinsically that bothered about. So the methodology has to be the motivation, has to be the motivator. The methodology has to be engaging because the content isn't. So I came up with this. You know, you've got a pack of envelopes. You've got 26 events in envelope number 1. You've got 26 dates in envelope 2. You've got to match them. They match one-to-one. Hey, let me give you 2 really vital pieces of information. The first date is the date he was born, and the last date is the date he died. See, I've done 2 for you already. You've got to set them out on your tabletop in chronological order, all the dates and events matched. You can only have 10 minutes. There are 3 of you. You've got to work out how to organize yourselves so you work quickly, because after 10 minutes you will need to stop. And then I'm going to give you the answers. Your aim is to be 100% accurate. Let's imagine you start with 50 points. And for every card you've got in the wrong place, you deduct 5 points. Your aim is to finish with a positive score. The higher the better. Oh, and by the way, I'm out of bounds for this. You can ask me questions to clarify the task, but not about Einstein. So you can get up on up to 3 occasions and go and ask people around the room for help if you want. Are you ready? And the kids are itching to open the envelopes. On your marks, get set, go. Now, that was a simple activity. But along the way, they learned things about Einstein that they never knew they'd be interested in. The fact that he lived in so many places, the fact he was married twice, the fact he gave up a child to adoption, etc., and then we're straight into the topic. And it's used 2 simple ideas: matching dates and events, and sequencing. And these activities that by themselves are quite simple, if you combine them, you end up with a level of challenge that is just about right. Now, for me, what I've learned along the way is that these activities in themselves can work, but don't necessarily do so, because the teacher has to apply a fair amount of planning and delivery skill. The devil's in the detail. And here are some of the things that I've noticed over the years make or break these kind of activities. The deadline. How much time have they got? Just long enough. And what you don't do is you say, oh, do you need longer? Do you need longer? I'll give you another few minutes. I'll give you another few minutes. Because kids then just learn to swing the lead. Have I got the right number of students in the group? For me, 3 is the default number. 3 is ideal. 4's too many. You get a passenger often with 4. 5, way too many. 3, just enough people to delegate, to have enough ideas to spark off each other, but all to be needed within the activity. The number of cards. How many can they cope with? Don't dumb it down. When students play computer games, they master a level. When they've mastered a level, they don't dumb down to a lower level to make it easy for themselves. They go up to a high level because that's what they want to do. They want to master difficulty, not master things that are easy. I need to check the readability of the cards. Is the language right? What do I know about their literacy level? Have I got the right kind of reading age in the text? And am I asking enough of them conceptually? Their brains work at high speed. And so in the Einstein activity, there were some simple matches like when Einstein was 18 years old, blah, blah, blah. But then a lot of the cards could only be placed by using high-level thinking skills like inference, deduction, and so on. And then the incentive. Why should I bother to do this? Well, if you're a kid, why should you bother? The answer is not because you're going to get a Mars bar at the end of it. And so many teachers say to me, you know, they want to know what the prize is. Well, that's because we've trained them like rats to want a peanut when they've done something. And, you know, that's really, I'm with Alfie Cohn on this. Read his book, Punished by Rewards. You know, human beings don't need that kind of bribery. What they need is a sense of satisfaction. And it means also that these activities have to be delivered with a tone and a demeanor on the part of the teacher that is exciting and upbeat and delivers a sense of joy. And that also, that list, by the way, is the list by which you can then start to manage your differentiation, which is a big theme in England at the moment at the heart of the inspection, framework. You start to adjust these variables to make sure that all learners can just about achieve it. Let me show you an example of the kind of activity that I just described, the Einstein activity. And this is a school I work with in Japan. And Chika, a Japanese teacher, has got to cover, like all Japanese schools do, the potentially tedious rice production calendar, how rice is sown, grown and harvested during the year. And she used to do it with a worksheet that they filled in, coloured in, and a PowerPoint presentation. Now she's taking them onto the roof and giving them, each one of them, a card. On the card there are some visuals, there's some text, and your job is in the next 20 minutes, class or group, to see whether or not you can put this together. No further instruction. The kids can work out how to do it for themselves. If you give them too much, you're dumbing it down, you're making it dull, they'll be bored, they'll chat, they'll get off task, because you've done half of it for them. Let them sort it out. Let them fathom it. Let them argue. Let them sort it out like they do in real life. And they have to look at the detail. They're learning a lot. Look at the girl on the right-hand side. She's really having to work out what information is on this bit of the sequence. They get it wrong, they rip it up, they do it again, and eventually, with a delightful struggle, and look at the smiles on their faces, that's the reward. They didn't need peanuts or Mars bars. They just wanted to know that they'd done it. And similarly, here with Year 7 in an English Catholic high school in Worcestershire, they are in an art lesson getting to grips with Henri Matisse, the French artist. And the first thing they've got to do before they look at his work and then try and use his style to inspire their own art, they've got to get to grips with his life. And I don't see any kids here off task, because the cards are created in such a way that makes them have to think they can only just do it. So the level of challenge, the nature of the challenge, is in part the way in which the intrigue is created. Now let me have a word about problem-driven learning and reverse teaching, and then I'll pause again. So, what we've said so far suggests that learning content, that is knowledge, facts, concepts which require understanding, and to some degree skills, I think can be acquired if they're presented to learners as problems to solve rather than stuff to take in. So this means less modelling on the part of the teacher, less demonstrating, less explaining, less telling, less showing, and more letting them have a go for themselves. Have a look at this example from a nursery, pre-kindergarten, then I'll show you a couple of examples of older children, of learning driven by problems. The teacher had chosen the story, the well-known famous story of the three little pigs and the big bad wolf. And the three pigs have got a problem because the wolf wants to eat them. And they build houses that he keeps blowing down because they're insubstantial. So the teacher tells or reads the story halfway to the point where the pigs have got a problem. And the students by now are really on the pig's side. They really feel for the pigs. And the fact that they are being pursued by this wolf is a real problem for the student. They feel it. So the teacher helps them to engage with the scenario, build belief in it, become attached to it, using a drawing technique, a collective drawing technique. The teacher draws in a few items first, and then the students come up in occasionally. They add things like a river, houses, flower beds, a duck pond, a school, a forest, a church, and so on. And they become attached to the situation in which the pigs are being pursued and are under threat. And of course the whole story is a metaphor for child safety on the internet, on the street, and so on, how you look after yourself in the face of aggressors. But you know, the students then are keen to solve the pig's problem for them. How can we help the pigs solve the problem? And so we've got to find out more about pigs, we've got to find out more about wolves. We need to read, we need to play with them, we need to feel what they're made of, we need to understand them. Why does one want to eat the other but not the other way around? Why is one covered in hair, one covered in fur? And quite a bit of engagement is created by the desire to know more about these animals in order to come up with a solution on behalf of the pigs. They explore building materials and they realize why some of these building materials are just no good. And then luck would have it, just down the road, some new houses are being built. There's a building site, so the teacher, having spotted the opportunity, makes an arrangement for the kids to be taken, complete with hard hats, to the building site and to be shown how solid houses are built. What they're built of, they get to hold and feel bricks, they get to look at mortar and see how sloppy it is and how it goes really hard when it's dry. And they look at all the other building materials, the metal, the wood, the nails, the screws, the glass, everything that goes to make a substantial, potentially wolf-proof house. They come back into the classroom and they make lists of the things they need. Look at these lists of building requirements, building materials. You can see here that we've got tons of bricks and we've got 100 weights of cement. Of course, to them that's what these marks mean. To us they just look like squiggles. And eventually we end up, through our imaginary play and the physicalization of that, we end up creating in the corner of the classroom a potentially wolf-proof, brick-built house that looks like a house down the road that's going to be solid enough. And the kids have sent the teacher back to blag high visibility jackets and danger tape and keep out signs, and the kids then want to do the artwork and create their own no wolf signs, keep out wolves, wolves go away, no wolves here, thank you very much. And then the teacher says, have we solved the problem? Has the problem gone away? And most of the kids say, yes. What do you mean? Well, the wolf can't get in. Okay, that's true, but does the wolf still want to eat the pigs? Yes. So has the problem gone away? Oh no. So what are we going to do? And the kids end up saying that the wolf is a nasty wolf because the wolf's unhappy. Why is the wolf unhappy? Because he's got no friends. Oh. So how can we help the pigs out then? Well, and now they're speaking as if they were the pigs. We could make friends with the wolf, and then he wouldn't want to eat us anymore. Okay, how are we going to do that? Well, he's never had a birthday party, one of them suggests. Yes, he's never had a birthday party, they will chime in. So what can we do? We'll give him a birthday party. Good idea. How old is he next birthday? Guess what? He's 5. And so now we're into a whole series of investigations and explorations about making birthday cards, about birthday food, all the stuff around healthy eating, all the spreading, all the textual stuff, all the tactile stuff, making sandwiches, all the art and craft, making party hats, all the stuff around maps and plans, because they know that party invitations have to involve a map, how to get to where the party is. So they go back to the map they drew at the beginning of the inquiry, and they draw maps and put them in envelopes with invitations, and soon we have the party with the teacher, guess what, in Roller's Wolf, complete with big ears. Which means that the teaching assistant on the left there is running the party, while the teacher in Roller's Wolf engages the kids in a lot of conversation about trust, about danger, about looking after yourself, about making friends, about being friends, about staying friends, about honouring friendship. And it was just a great occasion. And the most delightful thing of all was, at the end of the day, the little boy on the left there with his red jacket is wondering and asking the teacher, "Miss, are you really a wolf?" And she snarled at him and said, "Only in my spare time." But what a delightful day that had been. And just to conclude this little series of points I'm trying to make, here we have Year 8, which is, I think, grade 7 in America, looking at a piece of history. And again, the content is driven by problems. So the teacher starts off with this intriguing picture. Who's this man? Who's this man? Does anybody know who he is, by the way, out there? In webinar land? Any ideas? No. Well, the kids didn't know either. Well, then the teacher said, "Well, what can you tell me about him? What can you infer about him just by looking at the picture?" And they came up with all kinds of things. He's rich, he's a warrior, he's a leader, he's about in his 20s, he's probably from the East somewhere, and got the kids interested in this guy. And then the teacher said, "Let me tell you a few quick things about him. His name was Akbar. He became an emperor when he was only a teenager, as old as you. He was 13 years old, and that was in the year 1556. Let me show you where he lived. He became emperor of the Mughal Empire in North India. Look, I've marked it in red. Does anybody know what religion the Mughals were? Muslims. And next door, in blue, was the smaller neighbouring territory of the Rajputs. A different religion, any offers? Hindu. Which meant this guy faced lots of problems. Now, he survived to be an old man, so he must have overcome his problems, of which I've selected 4 that really happened to him for you to have a go at. He survived because he had great advisors. In your groups of 3, I want you to imagine that you've just been appointed by Akbar as his new advisors because he trusts you. And he thinks you are clever. He's appointed you for your wisdom, your experience, your skill, your knowledge, and he knows that you will be loyal. So help him out here. What do you think he should do? And he offers you for each problem 4 possible solutions for you to debate. And you then fill in a chart. As you agree, you're under pressure. You've only got 3 minutes to solve each problem. And you've got some extra secret information that only the advisors know to help you make your decision. Just have a quick look at a couple of these problems. Do numbers 1 and 2. What do you think? What would you do? What would you advise him to do? Oh, by the way, in your group of 3, you're not allowed to vote because that's cheap. I want you to talk it through. You've only got 3 minutes, so you're going to have to be quick about it. I reckon you can just about do it in that time. What would you advise? And you fill in your chart, and then the teacher says, "Do you want to know what Akbar did? Do you want to know whether he followed your advice? Do you want to know what Akbar actually did? Now you've filled in what you think he should have done. Do you want to know? And the teacher hands out sheets with the history, all the information, all the facts. This is the content. And the kids are desperate to read it because now they want to know whether what they advised was what the man did. And they're cheering and they're booing and they're dismayed and they're delighted. Little do they realize that actually it's a personality test to find out who the thugs are. Because of course he was vicious, at least in the beginning. And why did he end up being softer? Perhaps because he's shown his strength. And there was a whole discussion then about the content and the understanding of leadership in that historical context. The point I'm making is that I think in lessons where teaching is more than learning, where there's more teaching than learning, the teacher talks a lot, the teacher demonstrates a lot and shows a lot, there's not so much for the kids to do. Those lessons are where you're going to run into trouble. And what there need to be in lessons, I think, is more learning than teaching. And I think you can see, I hope you can see from the Akbot lesson that that's exactly what was the case. Now let me just pause a minute. I just want to, I've got loads of examples here, but I just want to ask you what you think again for a moment. I want to do it by just showing you a couple more examples and then I'm going to pause. So let me just re-enter at this point if I may. Some of you I know teach older students and this is A-level in England. This is where we're taking high-level exams and often the material is technical. So this is the school I went to as a kid. This is Sandbach School in Cheshire. I'm working there. 4 of my old teachers are still there. Would you believe it's that kind of place? And I still can't call them by their first names. Well, they want me to, but I'm not allowed. So it's still sir. Anyway, I'm working with a young, enthusiastic assistant head teacher called Sue, who's got to teach population theory in geography. Now, these are 7 people, all of whom have ideas about population theories, well-respected international population theorists. How are we going to get kids, these students, these year 12, they are, just towards the end of their schooling, how are we going to get them to really understand these theories without the teacher having to present them one after another, which is tedious? So the teacher comes up with a party planner. You've been asked to host a dinner party for these people. Imagine all these people coming to a dinner party. There's a big circular table. And to make conversation flow and to make matters more interesting, then you've been asked to organise the seating plan so that nobody sits next to anybody who's got a similar idea. They're all sitting next to each other with different ideas left and right. Can you organise? You've got an hour and a half. Can you organise that seating plan? Oh, and by the way, you've got some paper plates that I picked up from the 7-Eleven shop on the way in. And they spent an hour and a half solidly researching, finding out, working out the similarities and differences between these theories and just organised the seating plan in the nick of time. A problem that they were keen to solve with all its simplicity drove some high-level learning about similarities and differences between these population theorists, and when they then did an assessment, which was a past AS question, then their marks were astonishing because they really did understand the similarities and differences. And I'm talking about the idea that I've discovered if learners are asked to have a go at something, solve a problem, to come up with the conclusion to something that is puzzling, unravel and declare the answers to a mystery, then they want to know whether they're right or wrong. It's what I call the prediction principle. If you predict what you think is going to be the case, then you want to know whether it really is the case. It's human nature. Another name for this is just nosiness. We're nosy. We want to know whether we're right or wrong. Have a go, then want to know. Which is why the Akbar lesson works so well. And this leads to my notion of reverse teaching. The idea that most times teachers plan lessons in which they present something up front and then the learners have a go. They have a worksheet or they have an activity and they try and apply or practice what the teacher has taught them, as if somehow learning's not going to happen unless teaching has taken place. Learning is not dependent on teaching. And I think that the best kinds of lessons that I know that most likely engage and motivate learners are those lessons that start with learning. Have a go. Have a go. See if you can. Take this as far as you can. And then learners want to know. They want to know the truth. They want to know whether they're right or wrong. They want to know the facts. They want to know the answers. And they then want the teachers to clarify the situation for them. And this means turning lessons upside down. Lessons front-loaded with learning and ending with teacher's clarification rather than starting with teacher input and ending with learner activity. This is what I mean by reverse teaching. And I want to illustrate it with two examples, and then I'm going to stop for a moment or two. In this example, we saw these learners in a grade 3 year 4 class studying ancient Egypt, hieroglyphs, earlier on. And now they're doing the geography that comes out of this project. They're looking at map work, they're looking at scales, they're looking at compass directions, and they're using the Nile Delta as a context. So they've all got these big maps with lots of dots on. Can you see the dots on the map here? And these represent ancient Egyptian sites that they've already studied in their topic. And here are a pack of cards that the teachers prepared, and on one side of each card is a photograph or a drawing of one of the ancient Egyptian sites as it is now or as it was in its ruined state. As it is in its ruined state or as it was in its glory. And on the reverse of each card there are some clues as to where it is, geographic clues, like it might say, for example, this place is 100 kilometers south-southwest of the pyramids of Giza, on the east bank of the River Nile, about 120 kilometers northwest of Karnak. Now, there are no place names on the cards, just pictures and clues. Can you position these cards relative to each other? Can you work out where you think they are, which places you think they represent? Look at these two girls, look at these two twins here. Don't they think they've done a good job? They've sweated over this. Now they're ready for learning. And the learning happens naturally. The learning goes in painlessly when the answer sheet comes out. When the answer sheet's given, then they realize what they've done wrong. They realize what they've done right. They quickly recognize and rectify their mistakes because the brain is self-correcting. So the learning activity is then followed by an input, in this case in the form of a sheet, as it was in the Akbar lesson, the form of a sheet that kids were wanting to snatch out the teacher's hand. They were that desperate to read it. And in this example, we've got a low set of reluctant learners in grade 6, year 7. And I'm sorry about the quality of the pictures. I only had a really cheap mobile phone with me when I took these snaps. But I hope you can see well enough that this class are forced to do French. They've got to learn French as a second language. They don't like learning it. They don't want to learn it. They don't see the point in learning it. And the teachers are just tearing their hair out to come up with snazzy, entertaining ideas lesson after lesson to just try and kind of get through it. But they've realized that that's not enough. We're not in the business of entertaining kids. We're in the business of just pressing some important psychological buttons that create genuine engagement and motivation. So Graham, the head of languages, teaching this lesson, says, look, here's your task. Today you're going to learn how to tell the time in French, but I'm not going to teach it to you. You're going to work it out for yourselves. You're going to work in groups of 3. By the end of the lesson, you'll be able to tell me any time I give you in French. And you're going to do that by having a pack of coloured cards in your group of 3, and you've got 30 bits of card here. Each one's got an example of a time written in French. Now you know your numbers, and you know enough other bits and pieces of French vocabulary for you to understand these phrases, like 4 heures moins le quart, 3:45. I want you to see if you can work out the rules for telling the time in French. What are the patterns? Now remember Ralph Costa, Theory of Fun, the book I mentioned earlier. He said boredom is when the brain doesn't have patterns to work out. And so down at the bottom there's this clue, look for patterns. Now just look at how bored and slumped and disengaged these students are at the beginning. Look at this boy here, his eyes are closed. But watch what happens when the open-ended, challenging, intriguing problem, can you work out how to tell the time in French, when the packs of cards come out, look at the engagement. It's tactile, it's inviting. Look at this girl, she's smiling, she's excited. And the boys and girls alike are really keen to see if they can work it out for themselves rather than the teacher model it to them, because most of their French lessons are the teacher standing up front, getting them to repeat, getting them to parrot back what he's saying to them to see if it will sink in. But this had a totally different feel. The teacher is free to differentiate and encourage and know. What have you got? What have you got? And the kids took about a minute to come up with the 4 rules for telling the time in French. Of course they could do it. They're adolescents. Their brains are good even though they're reluctant learners. They're only reluctant learners in school with a fixed curriculum that they're not that bothered about. They're great learners out of school, and we just are trying to find the natural learning processes that work. Now, I have got other examples, but I'm going to pause again and just ask you to reflect for a minute or two on that. The notion in particular of reverse teaching. So I'm really keen to know what you think about this idea of teaching lessons backwards. So let me pause again for a moment or two. Thanks.
Hi, Paul.
Hi, Rob.
Hi. So you're asking what, sorry?
I'm just asking what people think about the idea of reverse teaching.
Sure.
The idea of loading lessons with learning activities, holding back on your teaching input, and allowing the teaching input, whether it's your explanation or an information sheet or something, comes after the students have had a go at pushing it as far as they can for themselves.
Cool. Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that for a few people, but the feedback's already coming in. Paul, I'll stop telling you how wonderful it is because it's getting a bit boring. The comments are lovely, absolutely superb. But within those wonderful comments, there are some people saying, let me find. You've really got to see all these, actually, the wows, the fantastics, and I love this. But there are people having difficulty in wondering how they can apply it to their particular topic, their particular curriculum area. Yeah. Which I guess is always going to be a problem because you see these. I mean, I'm looking at these ideas and I'm thinking, wow, that would fit with that. That would fit with that. But how would I fit that to such and such?
What subjects are coming up as?
Science has come up. Foreign languages are coming up where they have to learn the language before they can actually apply the tactic. Let me see. Sorry, there's so many comments. I've not actually had a webinar with so many comments. It's incredible.
I think that, I mean, the snag is, of course, that as we knew at the start, not everybody's going to get enough of their particular circumstance to feel really satisfied. And do you want me to pause a little while and just go live now with you asking a few of those questions?
Yeah, I think so. That would be good, actually. Let me
okay.
dig a few out. That would be great. Okay, science is the big one. That's got at least 5 or 6 people asking the same thing. How can I apply this to a Year 9 science class? How can I apply this to a science lesson? So that'll be the first one, I think, Paul, if that's okay.
Okay. Are we back on?
Yeah. We're on all the time. We're on all the time.
We're on all the time. Okay. Oh, right. Okay. All right. Yeah. I mean, okay, everybody. I really do understand that you've all got your own particular subjects and circumstances and issues, and it's really hard just in this amount of time to meet all of those. So just please bear with me and so on. But I do have in my collection really of lessons that I've either team taught or that I've observed and taken photos in. You know, I've got lots of examples from science and other subjects too, so I just haven't been able to include everything, and I'm not sure that I've really done justice to science. So let me come as close as I can. I didn't really build in many science examples. I'm not sure why, but let me come as close as I can by showing you a technology example, and it's sort of sciencey and it's about electronics. So can I give you this example? Do you think this will help, folks? This is problem-driven reverse teaching in the case of electronics. And the teacher is really struggling here with motivating these boys. As you can see at the start of the lesson, they are all over the place. There isn't one boy looking at the teacher, not one, and she's trying to get them excited about making a battery tester. And we talked about the lesson. She said what I'd normally do is I'd show them how to make a battery tester and then they'd make one. They'd follow my instructions. They'd do it according to my demonstration. I said, let's just reverse that, Sue. Just let them have a go at making a battery tester, and then we'll clarify it later. She said, I can't see how that will work. Not with these boys. Just have a look at this guy here. He's like, you know, he's away with the fairies. This boy's doing nothing but picking his nose. Look at them. He's still picking his nose. Look. And they're just not at all interested until she says, look, okay, here's your challenge. I'm going to ask you to make a battery tester. You don't even know what one is, do you? Think. What do you think it is? You're going to test how much charge. Yes, you're going to test how much charge a battery has. Now, I'm going to give you a tub. And in the tub, you've got all the bits you need to make a battery tester. Each group of 3 is going to have a tub of bits. And in there, I've put some bits that you don't need, as well as all the bits that you do, just to make it a bit more challenging for you. I'm also going to give you a clue card, and the clue card has got all the bits that you need to make a battery tester. It's just that you don't know what most of those are yet, but you'll be able to work it out. I'm sure you will. You've got the rest of the lesson. So Simon, give out the clue cards and get yourselves into the groups of 3 that were posted on the door, and I'll give out the tubs, and off you go. And I was astonished. I was taking these pictures. I was astonished at the level of engagement and interest and the level of thinking, the level of fiddling, the level of creativity, the level of resilience, as these students just wanted to work it out and see if they could do it. They became so automatically and amazingly interested in a way that I guess even I hadn't expected, not with this bunch. And they stuck with it. They didn't want any help. They didn't want any advice. They were determined to do it for themselves, even though it was a real struggle for them. And the fascinating thing was that they showed resilience, they showed imagination, they showed lateral thinking, but eventually, having thought that they'd done it and realized all they'd done was light a bulb, they hadn't tested how much charge there was, eventually they started to ask the teacher questions, like, Miss, what's this called? She said, look, I'm not telling you, write down the question. Miss, what does this do? I'm not telling you the answer, just at the moment, write down the questions that you need the answers to. So they started to write learning demands. They started to physically write down what they needed to know from the teacher. Things like, Miss, we need to know what these things are and what they do. So she said, okay, let's just have a plenary, let's take stock, let's just have a look. Tell me what questions you've got. So the first one was, Miss, we want to know about these components. What are all the components called? How do they fit together? What jobs do they do? She said, okay, I'm sure we can answer that soon. Any more questions? Yeah, Miss, do you use string or sellotape to fix the components to the component board? She said, good question. Any more? And there were loads of questions. And she said, look, we've got 10 minutes before the bell. I've got a card sorted here. If you sort out the pictures of the components with the names of the components and the jobs they do, I bet you'll be able to sort this out now from what you've done. That will then consolidate some of the information that you need in order to then understand how a battery tester works. So they devoured it. They devoured it. Compare that picture to the start of the lesson. Now, she was going to start with the card sort and then a demonstration, and then they finally got to make a battery tester. She just reversed the order. Now they want to do the card sort because they want the information. They are able to understand the card sort because conceptually it makes sense to them now. And the next lesson, which I haven't got the slides to show you just because of time, they then went on to have demonstrations from the technician and from Sue about soldering, drilling holes in circuit boards and so on, and then they were able to make their own battery testers. And they deeply understood how to do it, and that was proven by asking them to write instructions for making a battery tester. So I hope that's just helped to clarify.
Yeah, absolutely fantastic. I mean, I was a science teacher, and I remember actually one of my. Can you hear me? Sorry. I don't know if
I can hear you, Rob. Yeah.
Yeah, it reminds me of one of my early lessons, practical sessions. I used to do the work for the students. You know, I used to lead them through the whole process, and of course that's utterly boring for them. It's like being led on a leash. So putting the challenge to them and letting them discover for themselves, obviously that's what it's about.
I think there are 2 benefits really to what I hope you sense, everyone, that there are potentially 2 benefits to be had here. One is that adolescents, even young children, have an inbuilt desire to solve problems and to master challenges. And that's how you capture their interest, I think, and motivation. So first of all, I think this approach tends to be more motivating and engaging, even with potentially tedious and technical material. And secondly, when the input is made by the teacher or by the cards or by the sheet, the information sheet, or by going to visit a website, at that point it makes more sense. Conceptually they're ready. So they're ready in terms of motivation, they want the input, and they're ready conceptually, the input will make more sense to them. So if you're happy, Rob, I mean, I'm quite keen just to say a few words about the other bits and pieces, and then come back to some more questions. Is that a good idea?
Yeah, that's great. There is one more which I'll definitely bring up because it relates to it. I'll bring that up at the end, that's fine.
Do you want to just mention it now, then I can perhaps
Okay.
think about it while I'm
I will do.
presenting? Okay.
The other major question was about students who have limited reading ability, so
Yeah.
can't
Yeah.
access the ideas that you're giving them.
Yeah. Well, you
That's
know,
relating quite well to modern foreign languages as well, where they have to learn the vocab and the grammar.
yeah, I think in terms of modern foreign languages, I think as with with some other technical subjects, I struggle often with these sorts of things and wonder how can a teacher model pronunciation and give new vocabulary and give new sentence structure and syntax and so on without having to just stand at the front and deliver it. And a little later on, I just want to show you some ideas about externalizing your input. So I'll come to that. Also, of course, what I'm suggesting to you isn't something that you would do every lesson. There are times when, you know, the teacher needs to present something because it's foundational, and without it, students won't be able then to do anything interesting. But they're more tolerant of that, I think, if they're in a classroom which is a mixed economy where it's not all teacher-led, and they're more tolerant of teacher-led lessons, I think, when they're few and far between. And the final point about literacy and not being able to access information on cards and so on, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I work with very young children, and you've seen some of that, where they can't read or write. So we're working with pictures, we're working with symbols, we're working with very simplistic language, and that's something that, you know, I ought to have said and didn't really, that although you see many examples of mainstream kids here who are good with language, you think about how language isn't an indicator of thinking ability. Students can still think in all kinds of interesting ways and use logic and inference and deduction and intuition and synthesis. And we overcome that by giving them bits and pieces to put together in visual form rather than text form, I think. And this example of the battery tester lesson, I mean, they had a box of bits, not a box of cards with words on. And the same thinking we saw applied to trying to put physically the bits together. So I don't think the ideas are dependent on high-level language, to be honest. Are we okay with that, Rob, for now? Can I just move on from that?
Yes, that's great. Thank you. Thanks for clarifying.
Okay. I want to just say a word, and I'm going to, you can probably see down the left-hand side, I'm just skipping through things, but I just want to say a word about taking this just one step further and noting that the spirit of what I'm saying is the spirit of inquiry. And it's based on the idea that, you know, all learners, I think, all adults, adolescent and younger children, learners of all ages, I think, have an inbuilt desire to inquire. Sometimes, however, the kinds of learning that they're asked to inquire about isn't learning that grabs them. So one way around this, I think, is to create investigations and inquiries that are more open-ended, that bring the students into the decision-making with the teacher. So here's a science example from a school in Handsworth in Birmingham. And it's a school that's really been improving itself of late, partly because teachers have just gone outside the box and they've dared to ask more open-ended questions and have had some fascinating stories to tell about how students have become much more engaged with inquiries that they themselves have designed. So here we've got Year 9, who was simply asked to design a question that they could investigate about washing powders. And there were no other constructions. So they had to design the question, they had to design the method, they had to order their equipment, they had to ensure that their experiment was fair and that it was safe. Then they had to carry it out, they had to find a way of recording their results and then coming to their conclusions and presenting them. And the results, the teacher said, is that we've just seen so much more engagement because it feels as though this is a more natural way to learn. In this example, this is history. A school in Lancashire, England. This is grade 8, Year 9. And it all starts off with a murder mystery that just is the stimulus to a longer, more open-ended inquiry. However, it's a fixed piece of curriculum, which is intriguing. So this is what we mean by co-construction, where the fixed agenda that the teacher brings to the classroom is met by the student's own varied interests. Now, those of you who teach young children know full well that in the early years foundation stage curriculum, as we call it in England, it's child-led. You're following the learner. You're looking out for what's interesting them, for what's puzzling them, for the cutting edge of their learning, and you're being responsive to that along the way. Here, with older children, we've got a fixed curriculum to get through. And that notion of getting through the curriculum, I think we need to get away from that language because it already sounds pretty boring. So we've got to trudge our way through. So the teacher stimulates an interest in Jack the Ripper and the Whitechapel murders by doing the murder mystery, which is one of the actual murders that took place. The students didn't really know much about this topic at all. And you can see they're a fairly ordinary bunch. Many of them have English as a second language. Sorry, some of them have English as a second language, just by the way. Now, they took to this murder mystery, and as you can see, they came to some pretty good conclusions. But then, this is the interesting bit. This is where it's pushed now into an inquiry. They then were asked to consider the questions arising now from their interest in Jack the Ripper and the Whitechapel murders, the questions that they now wanted to find out more about, to do with the victims, the suspects, the crime scenes, and they created their own learning agenda, which they pursued through an inquiry that was on really resources that were online. There were some websites that the teacher directed the students to, but the teacher had also made an effort to create, using the school's virtual learning environment, a set of resources that replaced the teacher. Now, I mentioned earlier on about externalisation, and what I mean by that is the idea that the teacher doesn't have to be the one who presents live the information, the ideas, the skills. The teacher can invest in resources, can record himself or herself, can create podcasts, can create video clips, and students can access the information and even can access the teacher's demonstrations and explanations without having to hear it presented live by the teacher. When it's presented live by the teacher, it's generally to the whole class. It's undifferentiated. And the students have no control over that. They've got to sit and listen. They've got to sit and take it. Here, they're pursuing an inquiry using resources that the teacher prepared, but they're navigating their own way through those resources, and they're answering questions that intrigue them along the way. They're reflecting on what they're learning about the content, but also what they're learning about the process of being a historian. And the assessment activities, according to Matt Hardwick, the teacher, meant that in national curriculum terms they moved levels very significantly in a very short space of time because the learning had meant so much to them and it had gone so deep. And here's another example of externalising resources and pursuing inquiry over which the students have some control. In this case, it's a school in Sheffield, Hindhouse School, and the students have got to choose 3 islands to research from choose any 3 islands you like. I've actually got a collection of 8 islands for you to look at. You can choose 3 of those, or you can choose any 3 islands. But you've got to all do the same thing with these islands, which is decide whether or not you'd like to live there and give at least 3 good, solid reasons for that decision. Now, there were lots of resources around the room for the students to access. Again, some online, some text-based, some book-based here, some more visual than others. There were little explanations, bits and pieces from the teacher, and there was an interactive PowerPoint. I'll just show this to you because it just shows partly what the teacher had put into this, but then the benefits of it, I'm sure, will be clear to you. This is the interactive whiteboard, and students can come up, they can have it on their laptops too, and they can have a quick look at possible islands that they might want to be interested in. If they don't fancy Easter Island, they can go back. If they do fancy Easter Island, they can find out more. And as you can see, just popping up there is a hyperlink to a website, and they start a web-based inquiry that the teacher starts them off on by giving them pointers, giving them the initial route, and then they surf from there. If they don't fancy Easter Island, they might fancy Liberty Island. If they don't fancy Liberty Island, they might fancy Madagascar because they've watched the animated film. What is it I need to do again? Let me remind myself of the task. Have we got some more islands to choose from? Or what about Alcatraz? There's a new American series, Alcatraz. I'm interested in Alcatraz. Maybe I'm not after all. Oh, what about Dubai? Yeah, I know some people have been on holiday there, Palm Island. Oh, now that looks amazing. Oh yeah, I'm definitely going to study that. And what I'm trying to show you here is that inquiry, I think, in itself is good, but is at its best when students have some control over the decisions that they're making about what it is that they're studying, often within parameters because they're fixed, and some control over the resources. I just want to show you something here about the psychology of that and actually the neurology of that. This is Professor Robert Ornstein, who contributed to the American edition of my book, The Teacher's Toolkit, which incidentally, if you're in the US, please don't buy the American version because it's very stripped down and slimmed down and just isn't worth it. Go for the one that you've seen, the black and white one. Anyway, Professor Ornstein contributed some insights about motivation, and he said this, I'm quoting from it, research indicates that when learners feel as if they have some control over the type of task they're about to do, they feel positive and motivated. They've got control over so many aspects of their lives these days. Where they have least control is in school. They can be trusted to make good decisions. And he said, do you know what happens? When you make a decision, when you make a choice, when you're presented with options and you choose positively, then endorphins are released from the pituitary gland and hypothalamus, and these promote a general sense of well-being and confidence. It's all about neurotransmitters. And that means that choices allow learners to feel more in control, and that translates into a feeling of self-confidence and self-determination and empowerment. You see yourself bigger, or positively, you feel good. So the notion of co-constructed inquiry, where the learners have some choice, they're able to navigate the inquiry, navigate the resources, has an additional benefit, which is that, of course, it means that the teacher doesn't have to do all the upfront teaching because the teacher invests in resources, which can include recorded versions of the teacher's demonstrations and explanations. And I know that I'm just skipping here, but I'm going to ask you to forgive me for a moment and just let me go to the end of my presentation and then come back and fill in the other two dots. And the reason for this is because what I want to show you here builds on what we've just said. I'm just going to pause for a second and just ask any comments about open-endedness and choice?
It's just a steady stream of comments coming in, Paul. Can I, just before I start reading some out, can I just tell you we've got 20 minutes left?
Yeah.
So we'll need to leave about 10 minutes really for wrapping up.
Yeah, that's why I'm kind of jumping, Rob. And okay. If I don't do the other two bits, then nothing's lost really, because we will have dealt with the main issues as far as I'm concerned.
Okay. Interesting one from Pamela. Do you run into students getting stuck on false information before you clarify or correct facts?
The answer is yes, and I see that as a natural part of the learning process. I mean, in my life, I've often ended up down cul-de-sacs, and I've been, thinking wrongly and maybe looking at sources that were not reliable. Wikipedia isn't always, for example. And what I've also found is that, for me it's the case, and I think for all learners it's the case, that you want to know the truth, you want to get it right, and so the brain is self-adjusting. And when some erroneous information or some erroneous thinking is pointed out, is discovered and pointed out, then the brain delights in that and readily rectifies itself. So I think making mistakes and blind alleys and cul-de-sacs and falsehoods are just a natural part of the learning process, and we shouldn't try to eliminate them. We should see them positively as learning moments, I think.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Oh, one more, Paul, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Oh, it's disappeared. They're coming in so fast. Do you have a time limit for the open-ended inquiry activities?
Well, some inquiries for me only last a lesson. I've skipped over one or two examples. I've got a good maths example, which is about probability, and it's based on a fantasy scenario, a country called Randomia and the king, and how he decides to choose which son is going to succeed him. And he comes up with the idea of a coin tossing ceremony and so on, and there are various combinations, and which son succeeds him as king will depend on the combination of heads and tails as he tosses a coin. And the inquiry is to work out to find out whether this is a fair way of doing business. And everybody thinks it isn't, but it turns out to be that it is. But you know, that inquiry just lasts for a lesson. Sometimes you're talking about inquiries that maybe last weeks, half a term, maybe, depending on the complexity of the material, the depth of the questions. I've been working with a school abroad in Malaysia, in Kuala Lumpur, a great international school called Garden International School. And it's becoming much more inquiry-based as a school, and we've been looking at ensuring that the inquiries are substantial enough. They deal with global issues. They deal with issues of human nature and history and geography and culture and morality and technology, and you know, finding rich inquiry questions can result in lesson after lesson after lesson, I think, and be sustainable for quite a few weeks. I think so. It all depends on the complexity of the question and the amount of interest in it, I think. Okay, Rob. I'm going to just show you folks, if you don't mind, an idea just to build on what we said, and then we'll see how much time we've got left, just to say a word about visualization. I think we'll leave responsiveness. Forgive me just simply for overloading things. But I wasn't sure. I've never done a webinar before, so I wasn't quite sure how things would go and how long things would take. But I am keen to show you this, if you don't mind. I have an idea in the Teacher's Toolkit, which I call double take. And I've been using this idea in a more modern way, because when the toolkit was published 10 years ago, technology wasn't then what it is now. And I want to build on this idea of externalizing yourself as a teacher and allowing learners to access your wisdom and input and modeling as and when they need it. And this means that lessons can be not only highly independent, but highly differentiated and personalized. The example I want to kick off with is an art example from the school on the English coast, Weston-super-Mare. And these art teachers created, this is a project, wouldn't call it an inquiry, it's a project really, that does last half a term. And at the end of the series of lessons, by the end of the half term, the students have got to have come up with a cityscape, like the outline silhouette of a city, layered with card to make it three-dimensional, so it has relief, in the style of the Spanish architect Antoni Gaudi. So the teacher started by leading the whole class input. It was a teacher-led session on Gaudi's architecture, looking at Barcelona Cathedral and other examples, getting familiar with his curvy organic style. And then the teacher said, I'm also going to demonstrate the first step, which is how to create the background. That's the thing that you do first. And then you're on your own. You've got a timeline on the wall, you know where all the resources are, and you know how many weeks you've got, and I've shown you some examples of what you're trying to achieve. But I know that you'll have lots of questions because you'll make mistakes, you won't know how to do things, some of you will be ready to move on when others are still stuck, you'll be clumsy sometimes and so on. So don't ask me. I want you instead, if you have a question, if you have an issue, come to my mate. And this was on the interactive whiteboard and on laptops around the room. I've created a teacher's mate. I've doubled myself up. This is why I call it double take. The teacher is there live and the teacher is there in virtual form. So, for example, if you're away last week when we did Gaudi, don't come and say to me, who's Antoni Gaudi? Go to my mate, tap on the question, and it goes through to the Gaudi help page. It gives you the information that you need, just enough of it. You know, it can't give you everything, but it gives you enough of an insight. Or if you want to go back and check who Gaudi was for a bit of inspiration. If you want to check what it is we're making, I've got a whole gallery of examples there of previous classes' work, just to give you an idea. And now, I know I've shown you how to do the background, but some of you would really need to see that again, okay? Well, don't come to me as if somehow I'm going to repeat the demonstration. I haven't got time to do that. Instead, come to my mate, click on the question, how do I create the background? And I've made 2 little video clips there. This is me. This is me. And if you tap on it, put your headphones in, tap on it, and it comes to life. This is 1 minute, part 2 is another minute, and you can watch these as often as you need in order to be able to be sure that you're doing a good job and you're getting it right. Oh, keep an eye on our success criteria so that you can monitor and assess yourselves as we go. Health and safety issues, sure. Look, Simon, I can see you're dangerous with that knife. Look, come and see how to cut out safely. Watch these little video clips. How do I put it all together? How do I put it all together? Well, there we are. Look, I've got little video clips here that show how it's all assembled in the end. What do I do next? This is brilliant for differentiation, especially stretching the most able. So, for example, you've got someone who's really good at art, who's normally held back, waiting for the others to finish to catch up so that you can explain to everybody the next step. Instead, come here if you're ready. Come here. Let me just check that you are. I agree you are ready. Now, you're ready to move on from stage 3, which you've mastered, to stage 4. Put your headphones in, click that, and you get some private tuition, private instructions, a private demonstration of what to do next. Now, I think this is great because it's like highly personalized. It covers all differentiation. Students are well supported. They're stretched. And here's a modern languages example of the same thing. Now, granted, the teacher will have had to have done a little bit of work to introduce, of course, some of the vocabulary and so on and so on and so on. But if you imagine something like this that also includes podcasts and little video demonstrations of the teacher pronouncing and modeling language in the way that the art teacher had just done, this example doesn't go that far. But nonetheless, it's along the same lines. So can you tell me some useful nouns and adjectives to include? Yeah, sure. How do I say what the weather's like? Just remind me. Ah, good. How will my work be marked? Well, those are the national curriculum levels and the criteria that we'll use for assessment. How can I develop my sentences using connectives? Good. Can you show some examples of previous work? Yeah, I've got a gallery there. What common verbs could I include? Okay, good. What should I include? Well, this is our differentiated set of expectations. And the idea that the teacher doesn't have to always, is my point, not always present live, not always present up front, that you can depend on ways of externalizing your input for students to access independently and in a differentiated manner, then I think we're on the winning side. And my final slide in this little sequence is just to show you an example of a teacher in what we call food technology in England, cookery, who has opened her own YouTube channel. This is Alex Kelly. And students can see an increasing bank here of inputs and demonstrations from the teacher that they can access at home as well as at school. And their learning is really taking off, and they're so excited about being able to access the demonstrations as and when they need them, rather than just getting one shot at it by being in class with the teacher doing a live demo, and then that's it. It's just a much more flexible and interesting way of going about business. Now, Rob, we've only got 10 minutes left, so I better shut up, I think. If I do get a chance to input anything else, it'll be around just physicalizing things. But I'm going to pause and let you decide the best way to proceed for the final minutes.
Do you know, Paul, if I could extend this, I would, because I just know that I'm going to get lynched for cutting this off at any point. People just carry on. It's absolutely fantastic. The kind of comments I'm just getting through that I've seen coming through. I'm revitalized. I feel energized. My enthusiasm's returned. I mean, it's just been wonderful. Can you invite Paul back, please? Just non-stop. So we have only got a few minutes left, unfortunately. The software just cuts off at the end. So sadly, we are going to have to draw it to a close. So would you like to put your link up about the book, Paul? I think that's most important first.
Oh, why? Yeah, wow. Yeah, thanks very much, Rob, for reminding me. I'd forgotten all about that. Where is it? I've got examples here from dance and everything, but listen, that can wait for another time. I'm really sorry, folks, that you've not had your money's worth here, and I'm kind of covered everything. But
did you hear that, folks? He said another time. That means Paul's coming back.
Listen, point 7 was about responsiveness, and point 8 was about self-management. I've just looked at self-management with you, just in case you're kind of ticking off this list. Self-management was the example really around the art and the YouTube, you know, where kids get to navigate the teacher's input in a externalized way. And so, you know, we can dwell on that another time, perhaps. My publishers, Crown House, just wanted to offer you a 20% discount on these 2 books that you order from them. And there's the web address. And if you go to the web site, Crown House website, you'll find that there is a discount field for you to enter a code, and you simply enter webinar, and that will automatically give you 20%. The Teacher's Toolkit and Covering the Curriculum Stories, I think they are both available on Kindle. I didn't know until yesterday that they're also, it's an ebook on iTunes, at least the Teacher's Toolkit is. And it's amazing because, you know, the Teacher's Toolkit I wrote on an old crummy laptop in one of my kids' bedrooms in an ex-council house where I was living at the time, and you know, I just thought, I just want to get this off my chest. I had no idea it was going to become such a well-read book. So thank you all those out there who bought it and read it, and I just feel very humbled actually by the number of you who I know have bought it, and the number of you who've been listening to my ramblings this afternoon.
Paul, I have a copy of that book. I had it when I was learning to teach, and I used to refer to it all the time. There have been quite a few people who have already bought the book and said how much they love it and constantly refer to it. And you shouldn't feel
well, thank you.
In any way negative. It's absolutely brilliant. What you've shared with us today, I mean, you can see why your diary is booked 10 months in advance. It's just superb information, really actionable, really practical, that we can all use. And the comments such as, "Now I won't ever think of quitting teaching again. You've solved the problems for me. Thank you so much." I mean,
that's really kind of you folks who are commenting so positively. You know, I feel very encouraged by the response. I just offer ideas that for me have just arisen out of classroom practice. And I do believe the more I've worked at these kinds of issues, the more I've understood that they chime in with some pretty important bits of theory around zone of proximal development, Vygotsky's idea, social constructivism, Piaget, Vygotsky, and so on, the notion of flow, Mihai Csikszentmihalyi's idea, and so on. So it's very reassuring to know that the theory and the practice can work together to create, I think, quite compelling learning scenarios.
Well, I'm not even going to switch back to my slides, Paul, because I don't think we've got time to answer any of the questions. Sorry, my phone was just about to go off then. So I'm actually going to draw it to a close now.
Okie dokie.
That's all right with you. Paul, I mean, there's just this overwhelming amount of questions saying, please, can you get Paul back? I'm not going to put any pressure on you, Paul, because I know how valuable your time is, and I appreciate you.
Well, it's. I would love to, Rob. I mean, I fear that I've kind of explained what to me are the most important messages. I'm so glad that we had enough time actually to give in to do them justice. That's items 1 to 5 and item 8. And the idea of physicalization we can come back to another time. I've got examples of that, and responsiveness and so on. But you know, I'm very much open to open to persuasion. I'm just delighted to have been part of it. Thank you very much indeed.
That's wonderful, Paul. I'll not put any pressure on, but I do want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. You've given us some tremendous content. You made everyone very, very happy. So thank you so much. I'll just say to everyone before I close, we have got a second webinar running in about an hour's time with Steve Reifman. This is Rock Your Students' World, which is in a similar vein. It's all about student engagement. It's more on movement and music in lessons. So if you go to the Classroom-Expert website, you'll be able to register for that. I'm not even going to leave my chair. It's been quite a full-on afternoon for me. So please join us on that one if you can. That's in an hour's time. That's Steve Reifman, Rock Your Students' World. Paul, absolutely superb. I'm going to save the questions and I'll send them on to you. Sorry, the feedback, and I'll send it on to you, and I'll catch up with you in a couple of days if that's okay, Paul.
Okay, that's great. Well, thank you, Rob, and I'm going to check the football now because Blackpool are playing West Ham in the playoffs here in the Championship in England, which is a game of some significance. And then tomorrow it's Stoke's last home game against Bolton, and I'll be there cheering on. So it's a good job we had the webinar today while I've still got a voice left.
Good man. Are you doing any roadieing? I noticed on your biography you do a bit of roadieing, and you.
Yeah, sure. And for those of you in America, I don't know whether anybody knows Southside Johnny and the Asbury Jukes from New Jersey, a band that I've followed for a long time, kind of stablemates of Springsteen and so on. And so it's been a real thrill for me to do a bit of roadieing for them. The Zombies in England, Colin Blunstone, Rod Argent, they're on tour at the moment. They're in Leeds tonight. Whether I've managed to get up there and see them, I'm not sure. But no, my educational commitments have prevented my musical interest right at the moment. So I need to get life back in balance. Okay. And so Yeah, sure. So thank you very much, everyone, and thank you again, Rob. I'll see you sometime soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Thanks very much, mate. I'll speak to you soon. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye.
Okay, everyone, if you're still on the call, please do go over and buy Paul's book. It's a fantastic read. I'm going to wrap up now, and I'll be back on in 1 hour's time. There will be a replay available of this for about 3 to 5 days, but if you want to see the video again and be able to fast forward it and rewind it and that kind of thing, you could really do with being a member of confidentclassroommanagement.com or lesson-ology.com. I forgot what it was called then. Okay, everyone, wonderful. Thank you for your feedback, and those of you that are coming on the next call, I'll see you in an hour. Thank you very much.